Today I am headed to deer camp, which is in the northern part of Michigan's Lower Peninsula, but I'm not going for deer. Today I am looking to tap some maple trees to collect sap and hopefully make maple syrup. Normally you would go out late January, early February, right when you start getting into those days where it's above freezing during the day and below freezing at night, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But this year it's been a little rough with winter not really hitting until mid to late January. We didn't really get a lot of snow. So this year's been a little wonky, but hopefully the trees will still cooperate and we can get some sap. Now, first things first, obviously you gotta find a maple tree. Luckily I'm in an area where I've tapped before, so I know where quite a few good maples are. Obviously a good indicator is there's maple leaves on the ground, so even in wintertime, there's a lot of maples here. So coming up on a tree, obviously in the wintertime, not a lot of leaves up there, so it's a little harder to tell that it's a maple. Luckily, sometimes some of the trees are nice enough to hold on to a couple little leaves, and you can tell from a little crunchy looking, those are in fact maple leaves.
This is an aspen. You can tell that it's an aspen tree because of the way it is.
Another great way to tell when looking for maple trees when they don't have leaves on them is if you're lucky enough to be out when it is above freezing during the day, and say you know it's going to be better weather later in the week. If a maple tree has lost a branch, like it got hit by another tree or wind knocked it down, if you're lucky, they can actually form an icicle off that branch because sap is coming out of the branch like you're hoping it does when you're collecting the sap. And it'll come out and make a little icicle off the end of the broken branch. You can actually take that as a nice little winter treat, little natural popsicle. So maple trees, during the summertime, they collect water and minerals from the soil. They collect sunlight, and they turn all of that into starch that they collect in the roots that they store during the wintertime. Once the snow melts, temperatures start going up, they take that starch and turn it into sucralose. And then that sucralose travels up the tree and is distributed around the tree. Think of it like the tree's blood. And that sap is about 2% sugar.
Give me sugar.
So you think about it, you got to collect a lot of sap in order to get actual maple syrup, which I think is around 60 or 70% sugar. So you're taking that sap, you collect probably somewhere between 40 and 50 gallons in order to get 1 gallon of maple syrup, which sounds like, you know, oh man, you got to collect a lot of sap, but a gallon of maple syrup is also a lot of maple syrup. I usually collect enough to get about maybe a quart jar of maple syrup, and that lasts me for the next year until I get maple syrup again. So what you need for each setup is you need your spile, which is the actual thing that goes into the tree. You can get them made of metal, and then you can hang the bucket right off those. I prefer using the plastic ones with the hosing, and then you put that right into a bucket with a lid. It protects the sap that you're collecting from the elements. So for the setup I'm using, you're going to find a drill bit that roughly matches about the size of the tubing you're using. It can be a little small, that's okay. You take your food safe bucket. You're going to drill a hole on the upper rim here, in between the very top and this first rib down here. You don't want to compromise the top here because that's what holds the bucket in place. So you'll hit a bucket, you'll make a hole right here. Then you'll take your tube that I can fit the tube in. And again, you don't want to go too big on the hole. You want it to be a pretty snug fit because that's going to keep out excess water. You're not likely to run into any ants because it's still so cold out, but keeps bugs out if for some reason there are bugs around. And then there you've got your bucket with your hose and your spile. And then we'll go ahead and plug this into the tree. Now, depending on your equipment, your spile, which is again the thing that goes right into the tree, you're going to want to get a drill bit that's somewhere in between the width of the end and the width of the back here. You want it to stick to the tree somewhere in the middle, and you're going to drill a hole into the tree, tap this into the tree. If the hole's too big, you'll end up bottoming out here, and then this won't stay in the tree. It'll eventually fall out, and then obviously if the hole's too small, then you're going to have a hard time getting it into the tree. Now when it comes to the size of the tree you're looking for, you want a tree that's, I would say, at least 12 inches in diameter. So I'm looking at this tree here, is pretty close to 12 inches, which should be just big enough. So let's go ahead and tap her. So we're going to take our bit that we decided was the right size for the spiles that we have. We're going to put it in our drill. You want to tap it at about waist high, and you're going to tap it not directly, but at a slight angle. Then gravity can help the sap come out, and then you're not getting a pool of sap if you were to drill it, say, this way or this way. Coming in at an angle, all that sap can come down this way and go right into your bucket. So you can see that sap is already starting to trickle down the tree. So we need to get a spile in that hole so we can start collecting that sap. So then you're going to take your bucket. You're going to set it somewhere where it's nice and solid on the ground. And then I'm going to take my spile, put it in that hole. And then because I'm using plastic spiles, I don't want to use a metal hammer, I'm going to use a rubber mallet. And I'm just going to tap that in until you hear a difference in sound. When I started tapping, it was like plink, 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 and then all of a sudden it was like thud. And that's how you know that the spile has hit the point in the hole where now the spile is thicker than the hole. So it's in there nice and solid. I might give it another couple taps just to make sure it's in there sturdy. And then you can see the sap already starting to travel down the hose. So now you've got your spile in the tree. It's at a slight downward angle. And then what you're looking for, what we're lucky enough to get today, you've already got drips coming out of that tree. Now I like using 5-gallon buckets because I don't necessarily have the time to come out here every single day and check on the buckets, so it gives it time to collect some of the sap, and then you come back out, you got anywhere between 3 and 5 days later, and you'll have hopefully a full bucket. And the reason why we've already got some good flow out of the tree is because it's nice and warm. It's about 49 degrees out today, and then it's going to dip back down below freezing at nighttime. When it's warm during the day, the pressure in the tree is greater, and that forces the sap out of the hole and into your container. And then again, to protect it from the elements, you're going to take your bucket lid, you're going to push it down, you'll hear it snap in place. But like I said, you need 40 to 50 gallons of sap in order to make 1 gallon of maple syrup, which means you're going to need 40 to 50 quarts to make the amount of syrup I want. And I'm greedy, so let's go tap another tree. Now I marked this pretty giant maple with a good bit of rope here so that I would know that it's a maple when I came back. And the nice thing about this big tree is you can actually see where I drilled it the prior year. So if you look right here, you can actually see the hole that I drilled last year for sap. Now you never want to go too close to that hole. You want to give the tree, you know, a little bit of room. You don't want to make too many holes right in the same spot. So what you do is you go 2 foot above or below the hole, and then at least a little bit to the side. Now another good thing to look for is to look for a spot where you can see that there's a big root that goes down, and drill above that. In that root is where the starch is. The sucralose is coming up from those roots. That hole that I drilled is right over a pretty good sized root. So on this tree, waist high is about right here. I'm going to come down to here and I'm going to put a hole right there. So I'm going to hit the tree right here. Again, you want to angle your drill slightly up so that when you drill in, so here you've got another great spot. You can see that when I put my finger right here, sap kind of builds around it. Take your spile, put it right in that hole, push it in by hand until it's snug. Flowing at this point, it's now going into the tube. Although some would say it's a little late at this point, another way you could tell that it is a maple tree is to grab a little bit of that sap. So see, it's flowing pretty good. I've already got a good amount in my hand there. And you can actually taste it direct from the tree. It's nice and fresh.
In water.
Just ever so sweet. Slight hint of maple flavor, not a lot. But again, you're going to boil that down so it's like 40 to 1, 50 to 1. Then final touch on the bucket. You'll add your lid. So I've got 3 trees tapped today. We go find another couple and tap them, and then we'll come back in 3-4 days and see how much sap we've got. All right, so it has been 4 days since I tapped those trees, and it's a little long to leave them out. Usually you want to check on them at least every other day. The warmer it is during the day, the more flow you're going to get. So you really want to check it, like I said, every day, every other day. Unfortunately, where I tap trees is a little far from my house, so I don't really have the luxury of coming up here every day. And unfortunately, it has been 4 days since I tapped them, but let's see what we got. My guess is we'll probably have about a half a bucket of sap. Maybe we got a full bucket. Here's hoping. It's about 2.5, 3 gallons. Again, not bad for this tree. I'll probably tap it again next year. So once you're done with the tree, you're gonna seal the lid again to make sure that you're not sloshing anything around. You can pull the tube out, make sure it's relatively dry. I take a little bit of tape and I will cover up the hole. Now this tree was much larger than the other one that I tapped. So it was probably full at the end of day 2. My God, oh, it's leaking. This would have been a great scenario where you could have actually tapped, put a hole near the top of the first bucket, and then have a tube leading to a second bucket. And you can make a little chain so you don't lose as much sap as I did. But like I said, it's not going to hurt the tree. Froze a little bit in there, but that is 100% pure maple juice. Takes longer, but this is a lot easier than trying to squeeze the tree to get the juice out. About maybe, seems pretty full, maybe 4 gallons. Yeah, pretty close. Not full, but mostly full. This beetle's been hanging around the spile. I assume he's been grabbing free snacks while the sap has been flowing. This is the first bucket. First bucket has 3 gallons in it. This is the second tree's bucket. That one's full. It's got 5 gallons in it. This is the bucket from the third tree. It's got 4 gallons in it. All right, now let's get back to the office and start boiling this off. You don't want to leave the sap out here for too long. It's already been out here for 3.5 days. If you leave it for anywhere from 5 to 7 days, depending on the weather, it'll start going bad. So the warmer it is, the sooner you want to get it in and start boiling it. Let's get to work. So what you need to boil the sap is obviously some type of fuel source. I've got propane. I've got a turkey fryer here, and then I've got a nice wide pan on top. And the reason you want a nice wide pan is the more surface area you've got for your boiling sap, the faster the sap will boil off. Again, we've got 16 gallons of sap we got to get through, so the faster that we can start this process and get that water boiled out of there, the better. So we want a nice wide tray. I bought a fryer, so of course it comes with the thing you think of for frying. It's probably good for fries, but I'm using it for structure to hold my fine mesh sieve, and I'm going to use that to help get anything that is in the sap out of it. Things like sticks, maybe little bugs. Probably not, because they're in nice sealed plastic buckets, but you'd be surprised what still gets into your sap. While we were moving the buckets around in the woods, you're eventually going to get maybe just a little bit of leaf or stick or something. So that fine mesh strainer will help get all of that out. I've also got a thermometer. Now everyone knows water boils 212 degrees. Sap, because it's 98% water, also boils at 212 degrees. But the longer you boil it, the more water evaporates out, the more the consistency goes from mostly water with a little bit of sugar to mostly sugar with some water. And what you're looking for is 7 degrees above the boiling point of water. So 219 degrees. Now, if for some reason you do let it get above 219 degrees or the 7 degrees above the boiling temperature of water, if you do for some reason let it get too high above that 219 degrees, you are going to start getting crystallization, which not necessarily a bad thing. You can take your maple syrup off at 219 and then let a little bit of it stay there and cook it up until it gets even higher, and then you'll start making things like those maple candies, maple hard candies, and we'll go over that as well. We'll take this out. Not to get sap anywhere. Set that here. Now we'll let that go until it starts to boil. process of boiling the sap is quite a lengthy process. It can take up to about an hour per gallon of sap, even with the larger container that I have. After boiling about 7 hours at the office, I didn't really feel like spending the whole weekend at the office, so I brought the sap home with me, and we're going to continue the process here. So I was able to make a little shelter to keep the fire going. The wind wants to put it out. It is very windy today, but this should help it keep going, and we'll just watch it. You want to let the sap get down to about half as it's boiling off, and then you just keep adding and keep adding. You'll start to get this foam accumulating on the top. When you get that, all you got to do is take this off, start boiling some different sap, and I'm going to run this through some cheesecloth just to get rid of that so that doesn't end up in the final product.
7 hours later.
This is taking forever. It is the end of day 2 of boiling off our sap to make maple syrup. I have boiled off 15 gallons of sap, and I now have enough to fit it into one pot, which we brought inside. You want to bring it inside near the end because you've got access to a more controlled heating element, and you've also got your finished product close to all of your cleaned containers that you're going to use to store the sap throughout the rest of the year. Now we're going to finish off this syrup, and then we're going to take that and I'm going to show you how to make it into 2 different kinds of candy. But first, let's clean our containers. To clean the jars, all I'm going to do is put them in a sink in some kind of container. I also have the lids here as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour boiling water over them to just make sure that there's nothing in the jar that can then grow in the maple syrup once you add it in the container. It'll make your maple syrup last a little longer. Just looking for fill. Which will I need? We're getting near the end of the first vase here. Looking for 219. It's been creeping up here for the last 5-10 minutes. There it is. 219. Now each one of these jars is about 1.5 cups, so it looks like we've got around 7 cups. So now we just got to take the lids that we also disinfected, throw those on top. You do the little ring on top, and then you can throw those in the fridge once they've cooled down. And like I said, they keep for 6 months, a year, depending on how cleanly you were with everything. Now, just like the change in temperature caused a change in pressure in the trees, which gave us the sap, these jars, when you put the lids on them while they're still hot, when they cool down, that will cause a change in pressure on the inside, which will vacuum seal them and help them keep longer. Now let's make some candy. Now, cooking with sugar to make different kind of candies is all about temperature. So the 219 that we cooked our syrup to doesn't allow for the sugar to do any kind of crystallizing to make any kind of shape or form, so it stays liquid syrup. Now, if you were to cook it up to 245, then the sugar starts to crystallize and make more solid candy, and that's where you get your soft candy. And then if you cook it up to 300, that will give you maple hard candy. We're going to make both. Now we're going to take 2 cups of that syrup we just made. We're going to put it back on the stove, high heat, and get it above that 219. And our goal is to get it to 245. This is going to bubble pretty aggressively, and if you don't watch it, it'll go over. What I like to do is I'll take a knob of butter and I'll run it along the outside rim of the pot, which prevents the bubbles from coming up and going over and getting burnt on your stove. Okay, once the syrup hits 245, we're going to take out 1 cup. We're going to put the rest back on here and let that cook up to 300 for the hard candy. We're going to take this for the soft candy. We're going to let this cool for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then we're going to stir it with a wooden spoon until it gets thicker, about an additional 5 minutes, and then we'll pour that out on a non-stick surface and let it cool. All right, this has hit 300. So now we're going to take this, bring it right over to a non-stick surface, and just make a nice even layer. Like that. And then once that hardens, we'll break that up and that'll be our hard candy. So like I said, everything's about temperature when it comes to making candy. You're letting the maple syrup for the soft candy sit for 5 to 10 minutes, and what you're looking for is for that syrup to get down to 180 degrees. At that point then you can start mixing it, and that will introduce some air to it and help make it soft candy. Now the syrup for the soft candy is below 180. It's cool enough. I'm going to take this wood spoon. I'm just going to start agitating it, mixing it up here. I'll probably be here doing this for 2 to 3 minutes, and you'll see it start to change color, thicken a little bit, and you know it's ready to pour out for the soft candy. Now we're going to take this, and this one will be more of a spread instead of a pour.
Prepare for my finishing move.
All right, we're at the studio. We just finished filming a podcast. I'm having the guys taste our candy we just made. Ryan, what do you think?
Next level good. I've seen this soft candy before at a Renaissance festival and have never been able to find it again. But you made it, and now I want to go make maple syrup soft candy really bad because this stuff is heavenly.
Mm. That was about a cup of maple syrup to make that little bit. Yeah, but I made 7 cups of it, so we got plenty.
Stuff's good.
Hey, what do you think?
So good. So good.
That's high praise. So if you want to try it, try the recipe out for yourself. If you don't have the time to go out and boil sap for 16 hours, you can run to the store and get syrup. Just don't get the Aunt Jemima crap. Get the actual real maple syrup. Try the recipe.
No corn syrup.
Yeah, no corn syrup. Let us know how it goes for you. Thanks for tuning in.